What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I'm finally reviewing the last book in the Wheel of Time series, A Memory of Light, written by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So I want to preface this video by saying I struggled finally starting this video for a couple of reasons. But even before I get into that, if you've watched any of my previous Wheel of Time book reviews, you know I love the series, you know I love the individual books, but I was just kind of, after I was done reading Memory of Light, I was just kind of in like a shell shock state a little bit, just knowing that unfortunately with Robert Jordan's passing, there's never going to be another Wheel of Time book, you know, and it's like I completed the journey and it's like, now what? You know, before, because even when I finished book 13, Towers of Midnight, I knew it was building up to the last one, right? Memory of Light. So, but now that I finished it, there's nothing else, you know? So I almost feel like this empty little pit. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. If you've read it, and you have loved the series, maybe you know what I'm talking about. Especially after me looking around the internet, looking for answers to some of the questions at the end of the book. People kept dropping things saying, it's like, oh yeah, Robert Jordan originally intended for there to be a spin-off series too. It's like, whether that's true or not, just knowing that can never be, it just breaks my heart so much, especially because I love the series so much. I love the characters, and I'm just still so curious about what the surviving characters end up doing. Like, there's a lot of heavy hints about what they do, but I've just been with them for 14 books, thousands and thousands of pages, and now it's just at an end, you know? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this video, I guess, is kind of a love letter, not only to the last book and reviewing the last book, but just kind of the whole series. And just I thank you, Robert Jordan. I know you're not going to see this, but thank you for everything every word you've written. I've read every page. And again, Brandon Sanderson as well for taking the monumental task of going through Mr. Jordan's notes and putting it in book form for the world to enjoy. So thank you for that. Yeah, so I guess without further ado, let's start in the review. And I guess before I even start the review, I'll say if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you know spoilers for the first 13 books. You've probably already read the series. And if you haven't, I highly suggest you read the series. This is my favorite series of all time. And again, like I said, this is my favorite new book I've read. Just an amazing conclusion to the series. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's start digging into the review here. So if this is the first time you're watching me, Diggerdan, hello, first of all. But if you haven't watched any of my previous reviews, what I do is I break down 5 different categories, and I rate those categories 1 through 10 on the books I read, and then take the average of those 5. It's the Rambler rating system, so I literally ripped it from 2 to Ramble. No shame. They have a really good system, and I like it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But basically that gets me a number out of 10, right? And so for this last book of Wheel of Time, Memory of Light, I rated this a 10 out of 10. This is, I think, my very first book I ever rated a 10 out of 10. And it's just, yes, it is that good. I know some people complain that the ending's a little unsatisfying. They wish they could have a little more time with it. And I kind of agree. I wish there was maybe another 50, 100 pages to kind of help wrap things up. I think the ending was maybe a little too quick. But I think with all things considered, a lot of that, I think, is because Robert Jordan's notes were incomplete. And obviously, if he was alive at the time of the completion of the book, it would have been different. But I think with what we were given, it's the best that we could have gotten. So with that being considered, for me, it's a 10 out of 10. No-brainer. Yeah, and I think, again, it's just an amazing conclusion to the entire series. Like I said, we've been with Rand and Perrin and Matt and Egwene and Nynaeve and Lan and Moraine. We've been with these characters for thousands of pages, and in their lives for over like 2 years. They kind of repeat that a few times in this last book, saying, oh yeah, like Perrin keeps thinking, oh, I've changed so much in the last 2 years. Matt's thinking, oh wow, these last 2 years have flown by, and like we're completely different people. And just getting to experience that, to me, is just really special, I think. I know it kind of sounds corny, but like that's how I feel. I feel very connected to these characters, and again, I'm very sad that my journey with them is at an end. Yes, I know I can reread the series, but I'm never going to be able to read this series for the first time ever again, you know? Um, so and it's just something special. So yeah, like I said, overall 10 out of 10. But with the first category, I rate its emotional impact, and obviously to get a 10 out of 10, the five categories all have to be at a 10, so no surprise there. But yeah, just I was so emotionally invested. Kind of like I said in my last Towers of Midnight review. Obviously, if I'm in book 13, 14, like I'm gonna be invested in what's happening. I'm going to be invested in the characters. I'm going to be invested in the connections and just the plot and just everything. But Memory of Light takes the 13 books of lore, everything that's been built up to it, and the payoff is amazing. Like it's literally the last battle, basically cover to cover. I know one of the chapters is literally called The Last Battle, and it's over 200 pages. But I would argue that the entire book is the last battle. Um, and it just is phenomenal. A lot of characters die. There were a lot of tears being shed from my face, unfortunately. Um, like some of the big heavy hitters, like when Sion, or however the heck you say your name, I said this last time too, the previous Amaryllis seat before Egwene, when she died, and when her warder, Gareth Brian, when he died, that was gut wrenching. And when Gon died, even before them, like, oh my goodness, that was bad. That was tough. That was tough to do. And even before he actually died, and when he decided to slip on the three rings, it's like you as a reader, you know he's gonna die from that. But even just when he goes and tries to take on Demandred, and Demandred still beats him, and that is just so tough. That was such a tough read. And all this time when Rand is basically battling it on one with Morden, or later with the Dark One, and just almost his conflict is kind of almost on the back burner, and we visit it like every 20 pages maybe, I'd say. And you only see a snippet of like a page or two, and then it cuts back to like the last battle, like between the Trollocs and humans. I kind of think that's funny to me, because it like the entire series is built up based on Rand beating the Dark One, right? And it's either, is it going to be another breaking of the world, just like it was when Lews Therin defeated the Dark One, but went mad, or is it going to be just kind of peaceful and Dark One goes away, he's stuck back in the boar, or is he dead? And like just all these questions finally being answered and being paid off, and even kind of being explored too, like when Rand is in kind of mental conflict, I'll say. It's kind of how it's explained a little bit with the Dark One, and when the Dark One is kind of messing with the pattern and showing Rand the possibilities of what could happen, and one of the possibilities is Rand winning and defeating the Dark One, but killing the Dark One. And then it seems like it's a nice paradise. There's no evil in the world. There's no reason to have weapons, because he has a sword, and the child's like, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a relic from a time past." And they're like just like they've never seen a sword before. So obviously there has no need to be conflict, things like that. But then later, when he, in that vision or in that pattern weave, when he meets Elaine and he's talking with Elaine, he's like, something's not right with Elaine, and he sees something kind of behind her eyes, and it's like she's almost kind of a slave to the lack of free will, because if there's no evil, there's no choice in doing good or bad, if that makes sense. So if Rand were to kill the Dark One, it would basically like eliminate free will or free choice, which I think is fair. That's not something I considered until that was introduced in this book. Like I said in my Towers of Midnight review, when Egwene was upset that Rand said he intended on breaking the seals and killing the Dark One, I was all for it. I'm like, yeah, that makes the most sense. If you kill the Dark One, then there's no reason to having this dragon rebirth cycle, no reason of putting the world in risk. But then when that was introduced, where killing the Dark One maybe isn't as good as it seems, that I thought was really interesting, and being able to still explore things like that in literally a world-ending or world-breaking or world-saving book, I thought was really interesting. I mean, yes, It's over 1,000 pages. It's barely over 1,000 pages. So you got a lot of time to work with. But I can't remember if I said this, but this book is basically cover to cover, like warfare, battles, awesomeness. So there's a lot of death that happens. There's a lot of turmoil, literally between the forces of good and evil that happen. But for me, it works really well. So I guess not focusing on just emotional impact. Like I said, emotional impact's 10. Going next into characters. Characters, again, 10 out of 10. Like I've said before, we've been with these characters for 13 books leading up to this. So it's like you kind of know who you love them, right? And unless sometimes Nynaeve annoys me, but she means well, she means the best, and at the end of the day, she's just doing what she thinks is right. So I do still really like Nynaeve. Some of the things she's done throughout the series make me question, like, you're just a bully. But she's a bully with a purpose. Like a nice bully, you could say. But anyway, characters, 10 out of 10. Rand, amazing, right? I mean, you don't see too much of Rand, aside from when it's the flash to, like, the Dark One conflict. But, like, Matt and Perrin, these guys, like, this is highlighted. I feel like this is Matt's book, right? He finally gets full control of both the Shan-Chan armies and, like, just the forces of light. Basically, the entire world rallying against the Dark Friends or the Trollocs or just the Shadow Spawn. And just Matt basically playing chess with, like, Demandred, because Demandred's basically orchestrating the movements of the Dark Friend army or the evil army, and then finally Matt gets control of everything. So just kind of that back and forth, almost like fencing, but with entire armies, or chess, like I said, just crazy stuff. And kind of all this going on. Perrin on the backside is doing things in the world of dreams with Gaul, and trying to hunt down Slayer, but also sees some of the other Forsaken, like Grendel, in there, and trying to, like, disrupt her, but also protecting Rand this whole time. So it's like there's a lot of things being balanced, and there's a lot of high tension. And in my opinion, it was a very fast-paced book, because of all these things that are going on. So, like, there's a lot of chapters, especially in the last battle chapter, where you're with a specific character's POV for a couple pages, maybe even 10 pages if you're lucky. And then it, like, flashes to somebody else's POV. Like, maybe it'll be Perrin in the World of Dreams with Gaul, hunting down Slayer for a few pages, and then it does a quick couple paragraphs of Rand in the Dark One kind of going at it. And then it goes to, like, Egwene with her Aes Sedai fighting, like, Thames evil casters, I forget what they're called, the Dreadlords. And then that goes on for a couple pages, and then it, like, cuts to, like, Elaine, her on the front lines with Bridget trying to rally the troops, and then it cuts back to Rand. So it's like there's all these pieces being balanced in all these different perspectives. You're watching basically the last battle go down from, and I just think it's perfect. I think it's amazing. And like I said, it's warfare this entire time. And it's, like, really interests me too, because for anybody that has complained about any reading slog or any that, like, just not enough action throughout the series, that's paid off dividends in this last book. Like, it's cover to cover action. Yeah, and I just think it's phenomenal. And I think a lot of characters really shine in this book. Like I said, this is really kind of Matt's book, Perrin's book. It's really kind of the whole Edmund Fields, like, 5 book, I would say. Like Nynaeve, her just trying to, like, when she's with Moraine, while Rand's kind of fighting Dark One, she doesn't do too much, but she does enough. Like, when she sees Alana there, like, slowly dying, but she's still bonded to Rand, and Nynaeve realizes, oh shoot, if she dies, that's gonna screw Rand because he's gonna feel that pain. So her just trying to, like, basically take Elena back to health, and it's like you kind of have that in the back of your head, like, oh my god, is, like, she gonna die, and is that gonna cost Rand his life? Is that gonna cost him, like, the last battle? And while you're watching Matt trying to put these troops together and encounter Demandred. And then it cuts over to Perrin again when he's with Gaul, and he's like beating Slayer, but then Slayer does something crazy, and then it goes to Egwene again. Like, I'm kind of talking in circles, but that's kind of how the way it went. It kind of was going in circles, but it was being built up and progression was happening. The stakes were so high. There's just so much sacrifice in this book. Like Egwene specifically. When she sacrificed herself to take out Tame, or Tom, however you want to say his name, and then all those like evil channelers, the Shan, not the Shan-Chan, but the Sharam, they said they had like 400 some channelers, and then after Egwene's sacrifice, there were like maybe a dozen, I think is how it was described. That one-on-one with Tame with her, that was crazy. And I was bawling like a little child after she did that, and it was kind of a gut punch when she did it, but then also it went to Leanne's perspective, and she's in realizing that Egwene sacrificed herself, and like she sees the light, and then one of the other Aes Sedai's like Amerlin seat is dead, or is whatever, however it's phrased. She's like, oh no. And then a couple pages later, or maybe right, I can't remember, then it cuts to like Matt, and then he gets the report that Egwene died, and it's like, oh no. It just keeps going, like, because when it actually happens, the gut punch happens, and then you kind of get every character's reaction to it. Like when Rand found out, and he's literally screaming, like, no, not her. Like that was tough, man. That was tough. And it just kind of shows too, like, yeah, they kind of got on each other's nerves throughout the story, especially when, like I said, at the end of the last book, and even kind of the beginning of this book, where it was like kind of Egwene's camp versus like Rand's camp, kind of going at it, like kind of more the ideologies of breaking the seals or not breaking the seals. Kind of like that was the height of the conflict before the last battle started, right? So even though they didn't see eye to eye, it's like they still deeply cared for each other, right? Like and it just shows how great of a character Egwene, and how strong of a character Egwene really is, that she realizes the need. She's like, well, I can feel I'm going to be burned out if I let go of the one power right now anyway. So, and like Tame, he's wrecking my Aes Sedai with the Balefire, and with the Balefire, like it messes with the pattern, right? So it kind of turns back time and undoes actions of whatever. Like, Tame did Balefire on Aes Sedai, and then since they poof out of existence from the pattern, anything they recently did gets undone too. So any of the channelers on Tam's side, like any of the Dreadlords died from the Aes Sedai that get poofed away, then whatever they did gets undone, and then they're poofed back alive. It's, so it's like, so it's just like a double punch, and then like Egwene's like, oh my goodness, realizes how high stakes it is, on top of it just being the last battle, but Balefire ripping the pattern apart, ripping her troops apart, but then making his troops stronger because they're not dead anymore. It was very high tension. And then when she did sacrifice herself, and undid Tame, and when he died, that was great. He deserved it. He's been deserving that for a good 6 books now. And she basically kind of saved the pattern, in a sense, with the crystals, whatever, kind of band-aiding all those cracks together. But then also decimating all those evil channelers, too. Kind of giving them a chance again. Yeah, there's just so many things, so many characters, so many points on here. Like, to talk, it's just hard. This is why I said at the beginning, like, it's been taking me a while to actually talk about this book, even though I love it so much, because I just feel like I can't do it justice. So last thing I want to kind of highlight with characters, even before I move on to plot, is obviously, like I said, it's like focuses a lot on the main characters, like kind of Edmund's Field 5, and then kind of Lan, even. But then you kind of even get a sprinkling of other like side character POVs, like Hurin, I think is what his name is. He was like the guy, one of the Borderlands guys that could like smell. He's basically a tracker. Had like a smelling talent, you could say. The one that Rand had apologized to. You kind of get that snippet of his point of view, where he him and the troops he's with on the top of the heights, I think he was, and then he fought the Trollocs back, and he realizes there's not a wave coming, and then Lan is next to him and says, oh yeah, well they're clearing some bodies away, and then he's like, but the next wave's gonna be even worse, and then Huron's like, oh my goodness, it's gonna be even worse, and then a few pages later you realize that he died, and like, it's just so hard, and then again, like I said, that scene already with Leanne, when she realized that Egwene died, and even when Leanne again, when she got caught by Demandred and she was like terrified, and just all these little character moments too. Like, it's not just the main characters that have awesome character moments. It's like all these little characters kind of build up, just kind of add to the tension and add to the turmoil and add to just how high stakes this really is. Like, it's more than just life or death. It's like, is my children's children going to survive? Am I even going to have children's children, right? It's like the pattern is either going to exist or it's not. And I've never felt higher stakes in any form of media, in books, in movies, in video games, in life even. So yeah, just everything about this is just fantastic. And then my third category I like to rate is plot. Again, we already know it's a 10 out of 10. Basically, like I said, this plot of this book is basically the last battle. It's what the entire series has been working towards. This is Rand either taking out the Dark One, putting him back on the board, like succeeding or not succeeding, right? There's no yes or no. It's only yes or no. There's no in between, really. And I think it does really well. And I think kind of the actual last battle, when they're at the fields of Marilon, I think is how you say it. Just kind of the back and forth. Like, it seems like the numbers for the Darkspawn is crazy. Like, they basically number the forces of light 10-1, right? But you kind of know that there's a chance, and they kind of know there's very slight chance. But really, all they're trying to do is buy Rand time, especially the small force that is with Rand up at Shagul, or Shagul, however you want to say it. Basically, Mount Doom, we'll say. Like, they know it's like they're probably 99% of them are going to die, if not all of them. And their whole thing is really just give Rand as much time as possible. And then it gets a little screwy, too, with, like, the whole time warping. Like, the closer they are to Mount Doom, the Pit of Doom, like, the slower time is. So it's like Rand, he's in the Pit of Doom for him it feels like maybe a day. But everyone else, it's like multiple weeks, like further south, down in the fields of Marilor. And all these things, so it's like just kind of that time warping too lets Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson kind of do interesting things with the storytelling, kind of focus more on the last battle of the forces between good and evil than with Rand and the Dark One, which kind of makes sense because kind of in the previous times, like in book 1 and book 2 and 3 even, where it seemed like it was Rand versus the Dark One, but later we figure out it's not. Like, the actual conflict was kind of short, right? Like, so when he's in the Eye of the World, it's kind of the same thing. It's like Rand versus Dark One, or at least he thinks it's the Dark One, and then all of a sudden it's not, and then Rand wins, and he beats the Dark One, or what he thinks is the Dark One, and then they move on. So it's kind of the same thing, kind of sort of the same storytelling, but it lets them focus more on the conflict that Elaine is having, and Egwene, and Matt, and just so it lets them focus on more characters and wrap up more things. Because you kind of know that since it's revealed later that it's basically Rand, the light, and then the Dark One, which is the evil, kind of head to head. But it's weird because they're out of the pattern, weaving the strands of the pattern, but then they're in the pattern again. So it's like kind of the weird things, and it lets you get little snippets without thinking too hard about it or having to explain too much. Kind of leave a little bit of the mystery, but then you get caught up again with the big conflict, with the big battle. So yeah, 10 out of 10. Next is dialogue and prose. I love the dialogue and prose from Robert Jordan. Yes, a lot of people say he can be wordy. Like I gifted the first 3 books to my dad for Christmas, and a couple days or just yesterday when I was talking to him about it, he finished the first book and he liked it enough to start reading the second one. But his one thing is like he's very wordy. Like he sometimes feels like he over explains things, which is fair. Especially for first couple books, he's got a lot of world building stuff to do. Um, but by the end, like there's not too much more world building you can do. Like there's a little extra stuff, like especially at the very end when Rand does survive, but then he can't use the one power, but then he can like change the pattern itself or like weave the pattern. That's some cool world building stuff. But everything before that is basically just the conflict in the world that's already established with the powers that are already established. Like, for example, when Avenda is after one of the Forsaken, I think it's Grendel, and then it's just the two of them head to head. Because like Grendel is occupied by like Cadnusain and a couple of the other wise ones, and then Avenda, like after she kills Rurik, and she's like, "Oh my God, I just killed Rurik," but she understands that if she didn't, Rurik would have killed him or her, excuse me, because he was under compulsion from Grendel. And then she kind of pulls herself together, and then she weaves all these crazy weaves, and basically has like a energy spear that she ends up stabbing Grendel with as Grendel is trying to travel away. But Avenda makes contact before she can travel away, and then it's just the two of them basically on the top of a mountain or in a cave or something. But on her way to stab Grendel, her feet literally get blown apart, and it's like, oh my goodness. Like, just, she's not dead, but it's like, she's pretty incapacitated. Like, she's a warrior, or she's a wise one now, but she still has a warrior instinct, so her not being able to walk, like, in that moment, it's like, you're thinking, even if she survives, it's like, she's not going to be the same woman that we've grown in love. It's like, just these crazy things. But then later, thankfully, she does survive, and she gets healed a little bit. Doesn't, and they keep saying it's like doesn't seem like she's going to be able to walk for probably a couple years type thing. It's like that really sucks. But again, she knows that's the price she had to pay to defeat a Forsaken and save people and kind of again save Rand and give Rand the time that he needs to defeat the Dark One. So yeah, just crazy stuff. And again, I kind of already talked about it, but world building, that's the last category I rate. That's a 10 out of 10. Again, not too much more world building. But again, in that scene with Avenda, when she is up in that cave with Grendel, and they're kind of going at it, Grendel's trying to shove a shield between Avenda and the one power. But Avenda, so she's like, crap, I need to focus on repelling the shield. So she manages to craft a gateway, but then she ties it off. So maybe that one of the wise ones, or maybe Khazad, again, I suck at names, I'm sorry. But basically the older green Aja, Aes Sedai, could jump in and maybe help her out with Grendel. But then cuts back, different POV, but then when it does come back to her, she's like, she had to tie off the gateway, and she's like, crap, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. And then she had a thought, she's like, that's right, if I undo the weave, like, or if I cut the weave off the gateway, kind of like they did a few books ago with Elaine, when Elaine, like, when she did that, it blew this massive explosion. It was basically like a nuke. So Ivan was like, had that in the back of her head. She's like, I'm going to have to do that. Like, she's going to beat me. She's trying to throw compulsion at me now that the shield's not working. I got to do something. So then she does that, and then it cuts away. It's like, and that's when the gateway exploded. And then it cuts away. It's like, no. And then when it cuts back to her, she's like, I'm alive. How am I alive? And the explosion wasn't as bad as it was, but as Grendel released the compulsion weave, the unraveling of the gateway that Avenda did messed with the compulsion. So it basically cast compulsion on herself. So now she's like in love with Avenda. So that's kind of how she beat it. So I thought that was clever. A way so Avenda can survive and not die, but also defeating the Forsaken too. So just things like that is just crazy to me. And then when Rand finally beats the Dark One, when Morden like stabs his hand or whatever, and like that hurts Rand. I don't know how that happened. That doesn't make sense to me. If you do know, let me know. Or maybe now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's because they were connected. Maybe it's the same way that Rand got to basically put his mind into Morden's body, and that's how Rand survives, even though his body doesn't. Maybe that's it. But then anyway, when he stabs his hand and then Rand drops the sword that's not a sword, and then Morden picks it up, and then he starts, like, because the sword that's not a sword is a conduit of all the powers. It's Sadine, Sidar, and the true power. So he starts using or channeling the true power, and then Rand's like, now we got him. But so it's just the way it's set up, like you think it's, oh shoot, like Rand just lost. The forces of evil are gonna beat the forces of good now, but then turns out it's just a part of the plan, because Kalendor, the sword that's not a sword, has the flaw where if a male is casting, then somebody else can come in and influence or basically take control of it. So that's what Rand ended up doing, and he used the true power through Morden. He used Sidar through Moraine and Nynaeve, and then he used Sadine through himself. And like using all three powers against the Dark One to put him back in the bore and like seal it up nice and tight. I thought that was very satisfying and clever, because that way it protects Sadine and Sidar, because that was another fear he had. If he just uses Sadine, then it's going to have the Dark One's touch again, and it's going to make men mad. Or just use Sadine, same thing, make the women mad. And he's kind of afraid of the true power, because how effective would the true power be against the Dark One when it comes from the Dark One? That's kind of a question mark. But the fact that it's all three woven together against kind of makes it unbreakable. So I would be really interested to see how that would happen, or how long it would take the Dark One to break out next time, if he can. Because he has to seal him, that way he's not dead, and that way there still can be evil, there still be choice upon individuals. So it's kind of messy, but it makes sense if you think about it. And then after that, basically the whole mountain's kind of crumbling down a little bit, and then Nynaeve and Moraine make it out, but then Rand ends up picking up Morden's body and is walking, or like trying to run out, but it's heavy and he collapses. And then a question I had is, there's a woman talking to him, but we already know it's not Nynaeve or Moraine, because they're both already out of the pit. So I don't know who it is. If you know, let me know in the comments. That'd be cool. I tried to look a little bit, and I think some people were saying it was the same ale woman that I think like Nyoki or something like that approached Avenda when she was running to the Ale City, Ruidane, or however you say it, so she could become a wise one, so she could do the trials or whatever. I've seen that theory, and that makes sense to me. But then again, who is that person? That's never explained. And then another question I have is Avenda pregnant? That's never established. Like, it's established that they make love before the last battle. Rand and Avenda does. But also when she goes and sees the future, she sees that she has 4 children. So does she have quadruplets? But if she's not pregnant yet, and if she's still destined to have children, and then she meets up with Rand, who's now in Morden's body, and they make love, is it still Rand's child, since it's not his seed? It's technically Morden's seed, or really the seed of the man that Morden took over? So it's like kind of complicated. It leaves a lot of questions, and this was kind of the questions I was hoping would be answered after they were basically presented. But again, just the state of the way the material is, the way that Robert Jordan's notes were kind of incomplete. Unfortunately, he's passed, so he's never going to be able to tell us the answers or write any more stories about it. Makes me sad. But again, it's still a 10 out of 10. It's still a phenomenal end of the series. It's just kind of little nitpicky stuff, right? So yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on the book and the whole series. So what do you guys think? Did you guys enjoy the book? Did you guys enjoy the series? Have you guys read it? Again, I'm hoping that you did if you're watching this. If not, I hope this convinced you to read it or want to read it. But it makes me sad to see spoilers. But whatever, it is what it is. So yeah, that is my review to my favorite book of all time at this point in time. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit like down below. Want to see more from me, Diggerdan? Please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell notification icon, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.